You may be wondering what could possibly be interesting about the position of the N64 logo on cartridges. I'm talking about this thing right here. And it is actually quite a bit more interesting than you might expect. Certainly, when I first took notice of it, I didn't expect there to be as many twists and turns, or that the rabbit hole would go as deep as it does. So buckle up, and we'll go through this. But first of all, I want to explain why anyone might care about this in the first place, because that's kind of important. And I think it's a bit easier to explain that using Famicom games as an example. So I'm going to pull out those first, and then we'll go on to N64. So this is a pretty typical standard Famicom cartridge, and these, of course, came in different colors. Many different colors. These are just a few examples, but you can find virtually any color Famicom game. And these are just the standard regular shells. This is a pretty typical Namco cartridge. You can see it says Namco up in the top left corner. There's a space at the top where you can put a sticker on it. This is one of Namco's special gold cartridge. It's the same deal, just a different color. Here's a typical Bondi cartridge. I don't really like these, but they're certainly distinct with all the bumps and the rounded edge at the top. And of course these came in different colors. Here's a Konami cartridge. The label folds over the top, and this was back in, this released in 1986, when Konami, the K, looked kind of different. Oops. And on the back, you can see Konami is like engraved there with the funny K. Here's another Konami cartridge, this one from 1987, and this was after they changed their logo. And on the back of this one, they got rid of that Konami, and now there's just like a little thing that sticks out. And going on to, I think this was like 88 or 89. This one, you go on the back, there's nothing. It's just totally flat. It looks like Onda Yusuke used to own this cartridge. So there are all these little tiny differences, even among these various types of cartridges. Here's an IRAM shell with IRAM sticking out there. And these are just small cartridges. You also had tall Famicom cartridges. Here's one from Jalico. There's a Namco one. I just need to move some stuff. Here's a couple Koei cartridges. Now these look the same at a glance, but you'll notice this one says Famicom in the top left corner. This one says Nintendo. And you had that same shell, but a white one as well. Just endless, not endless, but a lot of different variations on the cartridges. And it's just a fun thing to pay attention to and to look for those details. It's something that you can see and you can touch it and feel it. And if you're collecting, then it's just a really fun, appealing thing. It makes some things feel more special than they otherwise would if you have something that's common, but the physical characteristics of it are uncommon. It just makes it feel more special to us as humans. And as a wise sage once said, fun things are fun. Sometimes it's really just that simple. Now, on the other hand, a nihilist would say, well, none of this actually has any meaning. It's all pointless. And certainly, all of us can gaze into the vast cosmos and marvel at the insignificance of our hobbies and of our lives. But at the end of the day, our human nature compels us to see meaning in these small, insignificant things, like what appears at the back of an old Konami cartridge. And we can look at the insignificance and we can say that our own lives are no more significant than these things. And yet they are also no less significant than these. And if we can find some fascination, some beauty inside something as insignificant as this, then perhaps it provides us comfort in knowing that our lives too have some small illogical fascination or beauty or significance to them in their own way. And you could look at this from a Langian philosophical perspective, and you could say, as Lang says, that objectivity does not exist. It's merely an illusion. And you could say that, Lang's perspective is very critical of our society and how our society attempts to impose a sort of collective, shared, quote-unquote, objective experience. Not only to participate in a society are we expected to behave a certain way, but we are expected to react to situations and to stimuli in a certain predictable way. And that's something that is taught through all levels, through the family, through the education system, through government legislation, and so forth. And the view is that this creates a contradiction in the self, because the self feels a certain way, but we are taught that we are supposed to react and feel a different way in order to conform to what society deems acceptable. Excuse me. And I think this is something that is much more apparent and obvious to us now in our modern society, because these mechanisms for enforcing this shared experience are much more obvious to us. They've become much more sophisticated, particularly in terms of online interactions. If you go online, what you see is going to be filtered through algorithms, and you go on Twitter, and if something is said that goes against the shared experience, it may be flagged with a disclaimer, to something that provides context so that we can see it and we know how we are expected to react based on the context and the disclaimer giving information about the thing before we actually read it and experience it without any other influence. And so in the face of all that, I think there is something comforting and something empowering, even, in finding something as insignificant as this and experiencing beauty and inspiration from it, and just finding something that speaks to you personally. And obviously it doesn't have to be old Konami cartridges. It could be whatever your hobby is, whether it's sewing or, you know, insect collecting or whatever it is that you like. Having something that just speaks to you, not for any logical reason, not for any productive reason, but simply because fun things are fun. And that's a very satisfying thing to feel. So, N64 logos. For a long time, I didn't really think of N64 cartridges as having anything distinct about them, because they're all in these gray plastic shells. Now, if you're collecting NTSC-J games, then some of them are in different colors. Like this is a black cartridge, and there are like a few dozen NTSC-J games with colored cartridges. But for NTSC-J, it's just the standard gray shell. But what I noticed the other day is that logo is not always in the same place. It appears on every N64 cartridge, but not always in the same position. And so I wondered to myself, are there any patterns that emerge? Are there any positions that are more common than others? And what I found was quite interesting. For one thing, Nintendo published games quite consistently had the logo in the bottom right corner. Okay, bottom right. These are all Nintendo games. Bottom right, bottom right, bottom right. You know, we could just keep going. Even something that's developed by Rare but published by Nintendo. Bottom right, bottom right. If it's published by Nintendo, 99%, it's gonna be bottom right. But of course, not all are bottom rights. You have something like this in the top right. Here's the top left. Another top right. Another top left. Top right. And of course, it wasn't only Nintendo putting them in the bottom right. Bottom right. Bottom right. So I'm going through all these cartridges, and I realize I'm not seeing any in the bottom left. Now, the bottom left position is where they put the copyright information pretty consistently. So I wondered maybe nobody's putting on the bottom left because they're already using that space. And then I keep flipping through them, and eventually I find this. This is Aero Gauge. It's a futuristic racer. Not very good. But as you can see, that logo is in the bottom left. Very unusual case. And it's something that makes this game, which otherwise kind of sucks. It's not very notable. It's very inexpensive. But it's now noteworthy to me because it has a rare bottom left logo. So I kept searching, and eventually I found another one. Rockman Dash, aka Mega Man Legends. Another bottom left logo. And finally, the end of my search, I was looking like way back in the games that I don't really play. The back of the drawer, and I found this Mario Party 2 with a bottom left N64 logo. Now this shocked me because all the other Nintendo published N64 games have it in the bottom right. And if we look at the other Mario Party games, they are also bottom rights. And there is nothing apparent with Mario Party 2 that would make me think that they would need to move it, or that they would need to move it to that position specifically. So it's quite perplexing, and just a strange detail, because not only is this the only Nintendo published game that I know of which doesn't have the logo in the bottom right, but that logo happens to be in the most rare position of all, the bottom left corner. So I own about I think 92 NTSC-J N64 cartridges. They're like all piled up around here. Out of those, these are the only 3 bottom left logo games, and there are about 210 NTSC-J cartridges. So if we assume that this ratio is consistent throughout the entire library, then we would expect there to be about 7 of these total. Of course, it could be more or less. The only way to actually know is to meticulously go through every single one and check, which I haven't done yet. But I did do a little bit of searching online, and I found a couple more. One of them is John Romero's Daikatana, that has a bottom left logo, and the other one, Chameleon Twist 2. Now the first Chameleon Twist is not a bottom left, but the sequel, they put it over there. And there are probably a couple others that I haven't found yet, but yeah, it's just a cool thing that when you're really deep into collecting, you start to care about this stuff, and you know, it's nice to just take interest in something that doesn't really mean anything, and yet can be so fascinating, and can be so fun to go through and think about. Anyway, that's pretty much all I had to say about N64 logos.